Sand beige paint, a single model year, never repeated before or since. Squared-off fenders, headlights shaped like the ones nobody wanted on a Jeep, bought off a shelf built for a Wagoneer, not a Wrangler. This is the Jeep enthusiasts in 1992 were quietly embarrassed to be seen in. Prehistoric monsters made it immortal. And the same year they did it, Jeep's own engineers were already planning to erase the exact design the world was about to fall in love with. Two car companies signed the same deal for the same movie in the same year. One of them got a footnote, the other got a legacy it never asked for, and spent the next 3 years designing its way out of. This is what one product placement deal actually did to two completely different vehicles. Not the same story told twice. Two outcomes from one decision, and neither company saw the other one coming. Start with the Explorer, because it's the one that looks like the safe bet. By 1992, the first-generation Ford Explorer wasn't an underdog looking for a break. It had launched in 1990 as a 1991 model, replacing the aging Bronco II. And it didn't need to grow into success. It walked into the segment and took over almost immediately. Within its first couple of years on sale, it was already the best-selling SUV in America. Ford didn't need Jurassic Park to sell Explorers. Explorers were already selling themselves. Now the Jeep. The Wrangler on screen wasn't the Wrangler enthusiasts wanted. The YJ generation, sold from 1987 through 1995, replaced the beloved CJ7. And it did it with a wider track, a lower stance, and a set of square headlights that Jeep purists never forgave. Owners had a nickname for it, Wronglers. It was the Jeep you bought if you wanted a Jeep but didn't need the real thing. It sold fine. It was not loved. Two vehicles, two very different starting positions, walking into the same movie deal. One didn't need saving, one nobody was rooting for. None of this was supposed to involve Ford or Jeep at all. In Michael Crichton's 1990 novel, the tour vehicles running through Jurassic Park were electric Toyota Land Cruisers, reliable, unglamorous, built for the job description on paper. That's what the book called for. That's not what audiences got. By the time Steven Spielberg's film went into production, Ford had secured a product placement agreement that replaced the novel's Land Cruisers with two vehicles from its own lineup, run through its Jeep division. 1992 Ford Explorer XLTs for the automated Safari Tour, and 1992 Jeep Wrangler YJ Saharas for the park staff getting around off the marked path. There's no documented record that anyone involved was thinking about which brand needed the exposure more. This was a licensing decision, not a strategy session about underdogs. Ford got its new SUV nameplate in front of the biggest movie of the year. Jeep got the same thing. What happened to each of them afterward had nothing to do with what anyone intended in the deal itself, and that gap between intention and outcome is the whole story. On screen, the two vehicles didn't get equal billing, and the imbalance is worth sitting with. The Explorer actually carries more narrative weight. It's the vehicle inside the film's most consequential sequence, the power failure, the T-Rex breaking through the fence, the attack that nearly kills two children, and does nobody because the Explorer's cabin holds. It's also technically the more elaborate prop, built to appear self-driving, with a stunt driver hidden in the cargo area working extended pedal and steering linkages under a thrown blanket, giving 1990s audiences their first glimpse of autonomous transportation years before that phrase meant anything real. And yet, ask most people what they remember, and they'll say, the Jeep. The Wrangler doesn't carry the film's biggest set piece, it carries almost everything else. The first sighting of the Brachiosaurus, the escape from the Tyrannosaurus in the rain, Nedry's last drive before the Dilophosaurus finds him. It's the vehicle the characters actually live inside of, scene after scene, and audiences absorbed that repetition as identity. The Explorer did more for the plot. The Wrangler did more for the brand. This is where the two vehicles stop being a matched set and start being two entirely different case studies. And it's worth being honest about how differently the numbers actually landed. Start with Ford because the honest version of this story undercuts the tidy narrative. The common claim is that Jurassic Park boosted Explorer sales. There's no strong evidence for that, and there's a simple reason why. The Explorer didn't have room to be boosted. It was already the top-selling SUV in the country before the movie existed. Whatever exposure the film gave it landed on a nameplate already at full velocity. If Ford's marketing team celebrated the placement, they were celebrating a car that was already winning, not one the movie rescued. Jeep is a different story, and it's the one that actually earns the emotional weight of this section. Enthusiast Press has reported, and this should be tiered honestly since no hard sales figures have been independently sourced to confirm it, that YJ sales saw a lift in the mid-1990s tied to the film's exposure. Treat that as reported, not confirmed. But the far more concrete, far more ironic downstream effect isn't about units sold. It's about what Jeep did next. In 1996, Jeep replaced the YJ with the second-generation Wrangler, the TJ, and the headline change wasn't the engine or the suspension or the frame. It was the headlights. Jeep went back to round. The company that built the square headlight Wrangler spent years hearing from loyalists that it had gotten the face of the vehicle wrong, and the TJ was Jeep's answer, an apology, engineered into sheet metal. Here's the part that makes this worth telling. The exact design generation Jeep was racing to bury, the one its own engineers considered a mistake, is the one that got frozen into the most recognizable frame of one of the highest-grossing films ever made. Jeep didn't get to choose which Wrangler became the icon. The movie chose for them, and it chose the version they were already trying to leave behind. Two companies made the same bet in the same year. One placed a car that was already winning into a movie and walked away with a nice placement and nothing more. The other placed a car it was quietly ashamed of into the same movie and watched the movie do more for that car's identity than 30 decades of dealership marketing ever had, while the company itself spent the years right afterward trying to design the very thing people loved right back out of the vehicle. Neither outcome was planned. That's what makes it worth remembering. The physical vehicles themselves didn't fare as cleanly as the story around them. Multiple Explorer props were built for filming, running versions and pre-damaged versions for the destruction sequence. After production wrapped, the surviving units were sent back stateside. A destroyed Explorer reportedly went on display at Universal Studios Hollywood, and a second unit went to Universal Orlando's Islands of Adventure, installed near the Jurassic Park River Adventure ride. For years, reports describe an original screen-used Explorer sitting there, rehabbed more than once. The tour vehicle's distinctive curved roof reportedly warped over time and was replaced with a roof that didn't quite match the original shape. But the current status of that vehicle isn't settled. A more recent account describes the Explorer currently parked near the ride's queue explicitly as a replica, one that's been relocated around Universal property alongside similar Wrangler photo-op vehicles. Whether today's display piece is the surviving original or a later stand-in built to look the part is genuinely unclear from available sourcing. That's not a gap in this research, it's the honest state of the record. The ride itself is currently closed for an extended refurbishment stretching through most of 2026, which only adds to the uncertainty about what happens to that vehicle next. The Wrangler's real-world trail is thinner still. At least 5 screen-used units were built, numbered 10, 12, 14, 18, and 29, finished in a Sand Beige available for exactly one model year on exactly one trim package. What happened to them after filming is contested between sources rather than documented by any of them. One account claims the stunt units were stripped and scrapped once their structural life was spent, with the hero unit's fate left unaddressed entirely. Another claims Universal retained the vehicles, pointing to their reappearance, narratively at least, in the 2015 sequel Jurassic World, where characters rediscovered Jeeps 18 and 29 abandoned in a visitor center garage decades later. Neither claim is well-sourced enough to state as settled fact. The honest version of this section is that nobody has published a clean paper trail for where the actual movie Jeeps ended up, and that absence says something too. A $900 million movie, and the vehicles that made its most memorable brand identity became untraceable within a few decades. 2 vehicles, one with a contested display status inside an active theme park, one with barely a paper trail at all. Neither ending resolves cleanly, and forcing one to resolve would be dishonest to what's actually out there. What's left for both vehicles is replication, and the replica market for each one tells you something about which brand the movie actually built a legacy for. The Wrangler side of this is thriving in a way the Explorer side isn't. Because the factory sand beige color was exclusive to a single model year on the Sahara trim, sourcing a period-correct donor vehicle is its own small hunt before a build even starts. And that scarcity is part of why YJ tribute builds have become one of the more active corners of the movie car replica world. Builders start with any 1987 to 1995 Wrangler since the underlying mechanicals didn't change enough across the run to matter, and the recognizable elements, red painted wheels, BF Goodrich all-terrain tires, the diagonal red graphics, the winch, are all achievable without touching anything structural. Jeep itself acknowledged the demand in 2023 with a limited-run, 100-unit Jurassic Park package for the modern Wrangler JL and Gladiator JT, 30 decades after the fact, a company finally leaning into the exact aesthetic it once tried to leave behind. The Explorer side is thinner. Full-scale tribute builds exist and occasionally surface at collector auctions, built onto any first-generation Explorer XLT donor with the tour vehicle livery wrapped over stock sheet metal. The Safari roof pod and automated drive appearance are cosmetic exercises, not mechanical ones on any recreation build. But there isn't the same depth of community around it that the Wrangler enjoys. The Explorer's screen time mattered more to the plot. The Wrangler's screen time mattered more to the culture that formed around owning one. That distinction shows up in the replica market as clearly as it showed up in 1993. For anyone shopping into either build, neither requires touching anything under the skin. Both are paint, graphics, and period-correct trim, accessible entry points into a piece of film history that doesn't demand a numbers-matching restoration to get right. Two companies signed the same piece of paper in the same year for the same movie, and neither one had any real control over what came out the other side. Ford's car did more for the story. Jeep's car did more for the brand. Ford's SUV was already winning and kept winning. Jeep's SUV was already an apology waiting to happen, and the movie handed it a legacy instead, one Jeep spent years quietly trying to take back. Somewhere in a warehouse or a private garage, or possibly nowhere at all, the actual vehicles that did this are sitting in far worse shape than the story built around them. The story outlived the metal. It usually does.